Everything is black and gold, black and gold tonight. Yellow pumpkin, yellow moon, yellow candlelight. Jet black cat with golden eyes, shadows black as ink. When the world turns black and gold, then it's Halloween.
Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the City of Bloomington Parks and Recreation Department, I would like to welcome you to Bryan Park and to the Festival of Ghost Stories. This is our 50th anniversary of the Festival of Ghost Stories. I have just a few notes before we get the stories started this evening. If you've been to the event before, you probably know up at the shelter tonight, we do have hot apple cider. We want to say a big thank you to Blooming Foods for donating our apple cider this year. And then we also have cookies from Baked. Baked donated cookies this year for the 50th anniversary. So thank you, Baked, for donating cookies as well. And we do have lots of Halloween candy up there as well, so make sure you grab some Halloween candy to enjoy this evening. If you're looking for the restrooms are located behind the stage, across the basketball court, over the bridge, and to Grandma's house right across the bridge is where you will find the restrooms, and they will be open for the entire event this evening. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Crystal. Welcome and good evening. This is the 50th anniversary of the Festival of Ghost Stories. I'm Jenny Ritchie.
And I'm Dana Burton. And it is the 50th. Does anybody remember 1975? We do.
We do. Yeah.
We were working at the Monroe County Public Library together, and we were so excited to tell stories. In fact, we began telling stories with children. And then one day we looked up and we said, the library should maybe have a scary Halloween story for older people.
Yeah, then the storytellers could tell the really scary stories that we'd been longing to tell. We called our first program
The Feast of the Dead. It was dark. It was after hours at the library, and it was so much fun.
So we said,
we'll have to do this again next year. And we did. And the next year, we moved to Bryan Park. And we began to tell stories in the dark. A Halloween tradition ever since.
Thinking more people might enjoy the fun of telling stories, because I tell you, it is fun, we said,
well,
what about starting a storytelling group?
And that was a great idea.
Yes. And here we are, unbelievably 50 years later. Count them, 50 years. And we are so grateful that for the past 50 years, the Monroe County Public Library has made us part of their programming. And more recently, we are so grateful that Bloomington Community Access Television has recorded our events, and you can go back and see us. You can see earlier ones. You can see us grow younger and younger as you look back, thanks to cats. And we are so grateful to City of Bloomington Parks and Recreation Department, because they give us this wonderful venue and they've made us part of their programming too. And this year, we also have to give thanks out there to the talented library science students and the folks who worked through the School of Education Library to do some really special things. And we also want to thank the artist, Connor Steele, who did our wonderful shirts in celebration of our 50th. So, do you get a shirt? I'm sorry. So we went through a lot of changes over 50 years.
Well, the two major ones we think you want to know about probably is that throughout the years we tried several names, lots of names, and we finally settled on the Bloomington Storytellers Guild. And the Scary Story program became the Festival of Ghost Stories.
And that is why we can stand here today and welcome you to the 50th Annual Festival of Ghost Stories, presented by the Bloomington Storytellers Guild. Let's go.
Hello, everyone. Are you ready to be scared? Ha! So before I terrify you, because I know I'm a very terrifying person, I'd like to tell you about a gift that we have for you today, courtesy of our illustrator, Connor Stell, and our fine artists from the Education Library, Kath Curry and Eli Hoff, lent their artistic skills to some tales that 4 of the guild members put down on paper, 4 loved tales that we like to tell the Festival of Ghost Stories. Dana Burton wrote a terrifying, grueling version of Mary Culhane, so that's the scariest one. And then I told a version of Wicked Jack, which I'm going to regale today as well. And then Lisa Champelli wrote Taily Bo. And never forget, Jenny Ritchie, one of our founding mothers. She wrote King of Cats. So I hope you will pick up your free I see some of you have already gotten them. That is our gift to you. And fear not, if the one that you want is all the way grabbed out, we have QR codes and we're giving those files away for free. So you're welcome to print them and share them and enjoy telling stories. Now, way back, when folks could earn a living shoeing horses, and angels and devils would mix with regular folks like us, there lived a blacksmith that I am sorry to tell you was god-awful. He was just a terrible person. He just delighted in being cruel and mean to others. Well, but they had to interact with him. They had to shoe their horses, but they just had to sit there and withstand his meanness day in and day out. He was so mean that they no longer called him Jack or John. They called him Wicked Jack. And you know what? He liked that. So Wicked Jack one day was sitting on his porch waiting to find someone to be cruel to. And when you know, out of the corner of his eye, he saw a body just kind of hobbling up the road. Well, he was ready because he'd had some plans and no one to enact them on. So he was waiting for this body of a guy coming on up, and he noticed that he was kind of unsteady on his feet. And so Wicked Jack, he was ready to get to work. So he went down the porch and he went down the lane and he scooped this man up. He said, "Here, sir, let me help you." And he took him real nice up to his porch, and then he said, "You look hungry. Would you like some food?" Because he didn't want to be mean on an empty stomach, don't you know? And so he took the body in, and this man was quite old. He was feeble and shaken and skin and bones, and so he took a seat at the chair, and Wicked Jack said, "Here, let me give you some soup." And so the man was trying to get it in, but he was shaking so much. He was so tired and hungry and old, he couldn't get it to his mouth. And so Wicked Jack said, "All right, I'll feed it to you. Get nice and full, because I've got some for you." And so he fed that man until his belly was tight as a drum. And just when he was getting ready to give him a real zinger, the man stood up. Not creaky like, but tall, and he opened his broad shoulders, and his clothes fell away, and in their place were heavenly robes, and giant wings sprung out of his back. Well, you may not know this, but folks there knew that one day a year, St. Peter, he's the one that keeps the pearly gates and makes sure you're on the list. He comes down to earth once a year. And the first person that's nice to him, do you know what? They get 3 wishes. Oh, Lord. Jack, I'm really sorry that it's you that I've got to give these wishes to. Let's make it fast. I got some ideas, said Wicked Jack. Okay. First one. Now, I don't like it when some busybody comes to my shop and sits in my chair. It really bothers me. So, for anyone that has the gall to sit in my chair, they're going to sit on it and stay stuck on it until I say, "Get off." All right. Second one. Well, all right. I know. I hate it when people touch my tools. It drives me crazy. So, the next time someone touches any of my tools, it's going to stick to them and stick to them like glue until I say stop. Jack, those are the weirdest and sorriest wishes I have ever heard. Please get this over with. Oh, I know exactly the last one. All right. So I got this fire bush out the front. I love when it turns bright red in the autumn. Oh, it just tickles my bones. But these little grandpappies and grandmamas, they take and make a switch out of them, and I don't know what they do, but they go off, and I hate it when people touch my fire bush. So the next time somebody touches it, I want it to snatch them inside and never let them go until I say go. Jack, those are the sorriest wishes I've ever heard in my life. I am so glad to be gone. And with that, he was gone. So Jack had a lot of fun with his wishes. Oh my gosh, he played so many tricks with his chair and it was so funny. He got so mean, in fact, that one day he heard a knock on his door. When he opened it up, there in front of him was a tiny little sawed-off devil boy. Oh, he looked ridiculous with his red leathery skin and his little tiny horns poking out. "What do you want?" said Wicked Jack. "My daddy told me to come up here and take you home with me. You're giving him a bad name. You're getting meaner than him. Now come on, Jack." All right, said Jack. Just have a seat on this chair, and I'll go get my stuff." "All right, fine." And so he hopped up on that chair, and oh my gosh, as soon as his backside hit that chair, it started going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and backing him on the head. Ow, 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 make it stop. "You gonna leave me alone?" Yes, stop. "All right, you sure?" "Yes, do it now." "All right, stop." And with that, the chair stopped, and that little devil boy disappeared in a cloud of smoke. That was kind of fun, thought Wicked Jack. So he kept on getting meaner and ornerier and meaner and ornerier. You know what's going to happen. Knock, knock, knock. This time he opens the door. And there in front of him is this bold, kind of swaggering teenage devil boy. Oh, he's got a chip on his shoulder. He's got this red leathery skin and a really cool motorcycle jacket. He looks amazing. He's like, all right, Jack, enough of your nonsense. Come on, come home with me. Sure. Just have a seat in my chair and I'll be... No, I'm not sitting in your chair. I heard all about that from my little brother. Nope, we're gonna go. Sure, he said. Here, help me put away this sledgehammer. It's heavy, and oh, maybe it's too heavy for you? Said that teenage boy. Look at that. All right, here I go. And so he picked up that sledgehammer, and as soon as he picked up that sledgehammer, it started whipping him all around the room and bashing him on the head. Ow, 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 ow. Wicked Jack, Wicked Jack. And he was flying out. Oh, it was so funny. And so finally he said, are you going to make it stop? Yep. And he did. And that devil, he just went away. He knew he'd been beat. You know how it goes. He was emboldened. He got even worse. It was a nightmare. Jack was a nightmare to be with. Until finally, he heard a... The front porch was creaking under the weight of some heavy, cloven beast. He already knew who he'd find when he opened the door. And there he was, face to face with the devil himself. Jack, come on. Sure. Have a seat. No, I'm not doing that. Oh, sure. I can't trick you. Here, help me put up my tools. No, not touching your tools. You go with me right now. Okay. All right, let's do it. And so Jack took the devil by the arm, and out they went side by side. And as soon as they got to the edge of the porch where that fire bush was, Jack went boom and pushed that devil right into the fire bush, and it snapped around him, and it held on tight. And oh my golly, you couldn't believe the howls and the gnashing of teeth and the words I'm not going to ever say out loud. Oh my, he carried on forever and a day until he stopped. And by that time, Jack was sitting on the end of his porch just kind of looking at his fingernails. You done? Devil said, yeah. You gonna bother me again? Be quiet. All right, Bush, let him go. And with that, and a smell of sulfur, the devil was gone. And Jack was alone once again. Now he was really full of himself, and he got meaner and meaner and meaner and meaner until he died. And that's when Jack saw before him arise a staircase, white gleaming towards the pearly gates. And he started walking up and up and up and until St. Pete saw him. No way. You do not belong up here. You are never going to be in this book. You got to go the other way. The other way? Yep, that's your lot. So he turned around and went the other way. And it got hotter and stinkier and hotter until he got to the gates. And that's when he saw the sawed-off little devil boy come run out. He said, Daddy, it's Wicked Jack. He finally got so mean he died. Oh my gosh. And so the devil came out and he said, you're not coming around here no more. Well, where am I supposed to go? Asked Jack. So the devil picked up a hot, fiery coal with his bare hands, and he gave it to Jack. And he said, "You go find a hell of your own." And so Jack went back into the land with the regular folks. And it just so happened it was about this time of year, and it was cold and frosty. And he ended at the end of a kitchen garden, and there was a big pumpkin patch. So he took out his knife and he cut open the top and cut a few holes open so it could light out. And he put that coal in the pumpkin and picked it up. And from that day to this day, he's known as Jack of the Lantern or Jack-o'-lantern. Thanks for listening.
Good evening. My name's Lisa Champelli, and the story that I have to share tonight is called Dottie Got Her Liver. You can find this story in a couple different collections of folk tales, including The Scary Story Reader, available at your local library. But I first heard this story from one of my favorite storytellers and longtime member of the Bloomington Storytellers Guild, Mary Fraser. A kind friend and mentor, Mary takes great care in all that she does. Quite unlike the young girl in this story. You see, Dottie was known to be a bit of a lazy girl who never did exactly as she was told. She tried hard, sort of, but then halfway through a task, she'd just shrug her shoulders and say, it'll do. Now, one day, Dottie's mother gave her some money and told her to go to the store and buy some liver for their supper that night. Now, the store wasn't far, just down the street past the graveyard, which her mother told her not to go into. Don't cut through the graveyard, just stay on the street to the store, and don't dilly-dally now, because the store is about to close. Yeah, said Dottie, as she headed on down the street, until she was out of her mother's sight. And then she went into that graveyard, where she found two men digging a grave with a simple casket resting on the ground beside them. Curious, Dottie went up for a closer look. "Go away, girl," said one of the men. So, of course, Dottie stayed and watched. "Don't touch the casket," said the other man. So, of course, when the men weren't looking, Dottie went over to that casket and lifted the lid and peered inside, where she saw the most ancient-looking dead woman who must have been in a car accident or something, because her intestines were all on the outside and her liver was piled right on top. Now, Dottie was the kind of kid who looked forward to dissecting frogs in biology class, and she was fascinated. And she peered in, she leaned in to get a closer look, and sure enough, Dottie fell into that casket and the lid slammed shut with Dottie inside. Now, most of us, trapped inside of a casket with a corpse and their oozy intestines, would have shrieked in terror. But Dottie just knocked on the lid of the casket and shouted out, "Hey! Hey there! Hey! Let me out!" Now, the two men digging nearby, they were so intent on their digging that they didn't hear Dottie at first. But then one of the men looked at the other. Did you say something?" "Nah, get back to work." And Dottie kept shouting and shouted even louder. Hey, let me out! I need to get to the store before it closes." Two men, when they heard that, they looked at the casket. They looked at each other. They dropped their shovels and they took off without looking back. By this time, Dottie had managed to push the lid of the casket up, climbed out, wiped herself off, and continued on her walk to the store. When she got there, she was dazzled by all the colorful jars of candy, and she used all of her mother's money to buy chocolates and lollies. She completely forgot that she was there to buy liver for their supper that night. She did happen to remember that she had a homework assignment coming up. She needed to make a map of their neighborhood, and so she asked the shopkeeper for some butcher paper. Butcher paper and candy in hand, Dottie headed on home. It wasn't until she got back toward the area of the graveyard that Dottie remembered that she was supposed to have liver for supper that night. She didn't have any more money, and the store was closed by now anyway. And then Dottie remembered the corpse in the casket. And Dottie returned to the site of that half-dug grave, went to the casket, lifted the lid up again, reached in, pulled out the liver, wrapped it in the butcher paper that she had, and said, it'll do. And then she headed on home. When she got back to the house, she found her mother in the kitchen frying up some onions in the pan, and she handed that liver wrapped in butcher paper to her mother, who promptly unwrapped it and plopped it in the pan with the livers and stirred it all around. And Dottie, what took you so long? I was beginning to get worried about you. And what is that smell about you, dear? Why don't you go up and take a shower before dinner? Too full of candy to be hungry for supper anyway, Dottie went upstairs to shower and decided that it was a good night just to go to bed early and read in bed. From her bedroom, she could hear her father down in the kitchen praising her mother for the juicy tenderness of the liver. Is this a new recipe, dear? Dottie loved reading under the covers at night when all was quiet in the house. Even after her parents went to bed, Dottie stayed up reading late. All was quiet. It was cozy. And then she thought she heard something stumbling about downstairs in the kitchen. And then she thought she heard a voice calling to her. Dottie, Dottie, I'm in the house, Dottie. And then all was silent. Did she imagine it? Was it just the wind? But then she heard it again a little bit closer. Dottie, Dottie, I'm on the stairs, Dottie. Not one to frighten easily, Dottie called back, "Oh, I'm sorry, but Dottie doesn't live here anymore." No response, so Dottie figured, oh, well, that'll do. But then the voice started again, and it was even closer. Dottie, Dottie, I'm in your bedroom, Dottie. Dottie ate some bad liver for supper, and she was taken to the hospital. I'm her adorable sister, Lottie. Silence again. So Dottie went back to reading her book under the covers. But then she heard that voice, that eerie voice, directly above her, whispering through the sheet that was draped over Dottie's head. Dottie, are you under there, Dottie? hiding? Dottie? Dottie! I'm here for my liver. And Dottie jumped out of bed. She found herself face to face with the gruesome-looking dead woman, her intestines strewn about her shoulders and trailing down her spine. She began running around the room with the dead woman chasing after her. "Where's my liver, Dottie?" And then Dottie heard her mother calling from the other room. "Dottie, what is going on over there? Why are you running about?" I'm just gonna run down to the kitchen for a snack since I missed supper, Mom. Where's my liver, Dottie? Well, I could warm up some of that leftover liver that we had for dinner. No, Mom, that's okay. And she just ran down the stairs to the kitchen with the dead woman chasing after her. "Where's my liver, Dottie?" "Well, I'm sure I left that liver and onions in the bowl in the refrigerator, dear. I can come down and help you find it." "No, Mom, I don't need any." "Where's my liver, Dottie?" And the dead woman grabbed the butcher knife off the kitchen counter, lunged at Dottie. "Help!" yelled Dottie. And she pulled open the refrigerator door, yanked out the bowl with the liver and onions in it, tossed it to the dead woman, who dropped the knife in order to catch the bowl, and then reached into the bowl and pulled out the liver. "Next time you go shopping for supper, Dottie, listen to your mother." And with that, the dead woman left the house, liver in hand, and the rest of her intestines trailing behind her. Thank you.
I'm David Matlack, and I'm so honored and happy to be invited to tell a festival favorite, starting with Dana Burton, who you met up here on stage to kick us off, and I've told it a couple times. It's the story of Mr. Fox, and it tells of Mary. She was born an orphan, she was an orphan child. Both her parents died while she was quite young, but she was lovingly raised by her 4 older brothers. And Mary grew into a delightful creature. She was charming and witty, curious, courageous, a delightful young woman. And when Mary came of age to go a-courting, well, all the young boys and men of the village came calling. And as was the custom of the day, Mary always made sure that one of her brothers was nearby. Now, it was around this time, when Mary came of age, that there came to town a stranger. One day, all the people of the village paused to hear the thunder of hooves and the rumbling of a carriage, and from their door windows and their shop doors, they watched in amazement as 6 black horses, pulling a magnificent black carriage, came down the dusty road into town. The coachman pulled them up to a halt in the town square. The carriage door opened, and out stepped a tall, tall man. He was dressed all in black, black top hat, black overcoat, black suit, black boots, a black walking cane, and he had a long, thick red beard. And he said his name was Mr. Fox. Now, in time, Mr. Fox was coming to the village quite often, and it became apparent that he was coming to go a-courting. And well, of course, it was Mary that caught his eye. And well, he caught Mary's eye too. Oh, he was so worldly and dashing and obviously quite wealthy, so unlike the other men, boys really, of the village. And so indeed, they started courting. And as was the custom of the day, Mary always made sure that one of her brothers was nearby. He would come on a Tuesday for tea. Mary would pour the tea, and they would sit and talk, and he would regale her of tales of his worldly travels. And this went on for some time, when one day, a Tuesday, Mary poured the tea. She sat down, she said, "You know, Mr. Fox, I've told you all about myself, and well, you've told me quite a bit about yourself, but I don't believe I know where you live. In fact, no one in the village knows where you live. Well, it's no secret. I live in that grand estate, north of town, beyond the woods, beyond the meadow, the grand estate. Ah, Mr. Fox, said Mary, that's why no one knows where you live. The good people of this village don't go there. Well, why not? It's a perfectly fine estate. Well, someday I'll take you there myself and show you. Now, he never quite got around to that, and that was just fine with Mary, for she had heard terrifying stories of horrible goings-on. And then one day, it was a Sunday. It was the first truly warm day of spring. Mary went to the woods north of town to pick bluebells, and she was following the brook, lost in thought, picking bluebells. When she looked up, she looked around, and she realized that she was lost. She could not remember from which direction she had come. She thought, well, I will simply follow the brook, and it will either take me back to the village or it will not. And so Mary began following the brook, and the brook burst open into a bright sunny meadow. And there, rising over the far knoll of the meadow, was a grand estate. 8 chimneys, 2 stories, magnificent floor-to-ceiling windows. It was a grand estate. Mary thought, well, that must be Mr. Fox's place. Oh, I would like to see it. And he did invite me. And so Mary approached. And as she stepped up onto the massive portico, she noticed above the massive oaken door on the lintel there were the words, "Be bold, be bold." Mary thought, well, I'm a bold lass, I am. And so she rang the brass knocker. Boom, boom. But it rang hollow inside, for no one was home. Well, now Mary was just so curious to see inside that place, and so she tried the door, and it was unlocked. And so Mary stepped inside, and it was a grand, great hall. Oh, gold-gilded mirrors and paintings and Persian rugs and exotic plants. But the thing that really caught her eye was a grand sweeping staircase. So Mary approached the staircase, and she held out her apron like a fancy ball gown, and she ascended like a princess at a ball. Up on the top, long hallways, sunlight streaming through those windows. Mary began walking down the long, long hall. The thing that really caught her eye at the very end was another door. And above that door were the words, be bold, but not too bold. Oh, but Mary thought, oh, this must be the master bedroom. I should so like to see it. And I am a bold lass. And so she tried the door. It was unlocked. She stepped inside, and it was a grand master bedroom. But the thing that really caught her eye was there, under the slope of the roof, was a little door. And Mary thought, oh, that must be his wardrobe. Oh, he's such a dandy dresser. I would so like to see his wardrobe. And as she approached that door, above it were the words, be bold, but not too bold, lest your heart's blood run cold. Mary paid this no mind. She simply had to see what was inside. And so she opened the door and she stooped down. And once her eyes adjusted to the darkness, she could see along one wall many hooks with white wedding dresses, stained with dark stains. And along the other wall were 3 barrels. The first was filled with mats of skin and hair. The second barrel was filled with blood. The third barrel, bones. Oh, well, Mary spun around and she stooped down and ran out of there, down the hallway, sunlight streaming through those windows, when she heard something out in the meadow, and she looked and she saw Mr. Fox, and he was dragging a young maiden by her hair, and she was kicking and screaming for her life, but he was coming right towards the house. So Mary ran down those stairs. She hid under the staircase. Boom! Opened that door, that Mr. Fox. He strode across that grand hall, up the stairs, that poor maiden kicking and screaming, and she reached out and she clasped the banister for her life. But that Mr. Fox, without missing a stride, he pulled out his sword and cut off her hand, dragged her up those stairs, down the hall, into that room, and all was quiet. Now that hand fell right into Mary's lap. Well, she wrapped it up in her apron, and she ran out of there as fast as she could, across the meadow, through the woods, and by the grace of God, she made it back to her village, safe. Now that was on a Sunday. And on Tuesday, Mr. Fox came calling. And this time, Mary made sure all 4 of her brothers were nearby. Well, Mary poured the tea. She sat down. Mr. Fox said, "Well, Mary, you don't look well. Have you been ill?" "Oh, it's nothing. I've not been sleeping well. Well, I've been having a bad dream." "Oh, well, tell me your dream. I have studied the esoteric arts. I can interpret your dream for you. Tell me your dream." "All right, Mr. Fox." Mary set down her tea. "Well, in my dream, Mr. Fox, I dreamt that I was lost in the woods north of town, and I came to a sunny meadow, and on the far edge of that meadow was a grand estate. And as I approached the door of that grand estate, I saw the words, 'Be bold, be bold.'" No. "Oh, but Mr. Fox, in my dream, it was so. And I entered that house, and I went up the stairs and down a hallway and came to another door. And above that door were the words, 'Be bold, but not too bold.' No, it was not so." "Oh, but Mr. Fox, in my dream, it was so. And I entered that room, and there was another door. And above that door were the words, 'Be bold, but not too bold, lest your heart's blood run cold.' No, it was not so. It is not so." "Oh, but Mr. Fox, in my dream, it was so. And I entered that closet, and there were many wedding dresses stained with blood, and 3 barrels, one of skin and hair, one of blood, and one of bones. And I ran out of that place, and I heard something in the meadow, and I saw you, Mr. Fox, dragging a young maiden by her hair. And you dragged her into the grand hall and up those stairs, and she was kicking and screaming for her life, and she reached out and clasped the banister, and you, Mr. Fox, without missing a stride, you pulled out your sword and cut off her hand and dragged her down the hall, and all was quiet. No, and now Mr. Fox rose to his feet. No, it was not so, it is not so, and God forbid that it should be so. And now Mary rose to her feet. Oh, but Mr. Fox, it was so, and it is so, and here is the very hand to show. And then all 4 of Mary's brothers descended on Mr. Fox. And what they did to him, I shall not say, lest your heart's blood run cold. Thank you. So it is getting cold out, but next up is our wonderful Laura, who's been the coordinator of this for the last many years, and she just might get you up moving around to warm up. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Laura Clavio. 3 great stories so far. Let's give them all a hand. Mine's a little lighter, and it's time for you to stand up and maybe move around just a little bit. I'm doing kind of a story song, and I'd like you all to join in on the chorus. I know you're all very intelligent, and you can figure out these lyrics. So let's just try it once. And it goes like this. Ghost party tonight. Ghost party tonight. Ghost party tonight. Ghost party tonight. Can you do that? Let's try it again. Ghost party tonight. Ghost party tonight. Ghost party tonight. Ghost party tonight. Fantastic. Okay. Here we go. Technical difficulty with the phone. One moment, please. You can be standing and stretching right now. Let's move it. They're saying, there we go. By the way, the name of this song is Ghost Party Tonight. Here we go. No, there we don't go. Okay, I think we got it this time. Okay, we're going to start again. The night was dark in the cemetery park, and although it wasn't snowing, a cold wind had been blowing. The trees were all creaking, making sounds like someone shrieking. You know how things are when you go out in the car, driving around with your lady, makes you just a little crazy. Bobby had a plan to show Jenny he's a man, so he had no fear of the ghost abiding here. Bobby parked his Jake by the cemetery gate, and he asked her to come walking, and they do a little talking. He would show her some graves. He was feeling so brave. She held his hand tight. He was doing all right. Ghost party tonight. Come on, ghost party tonight. Ghost party tonight. Ghost party tonight. It was the midnight hour, a night of supernatural power. It was Halloween, but no ghosts to Bobby seen. They walked the graveyard, their hearts a pumping hard. All at once they had a feeling like the ground was rocking and reeling. The clouds took flight, a full moon spilled its light on the graveyard floor. Now let me tell you more. All at once there was some moaning and some strange and early groaning. Jenny shrieked with fright, clung to Bobby tight. And before they knew it, from the ground poking through it came an arm all bony. Jenny cried, "That's not funny!" He grabbed the gravestone with a naked white bone. Ghost party tonight. Ghost party tonight. Ghost party tonight. Ghost party tonight. Well, before they could run, they heard 100 fingers clawing. The earth started moving and all the bones were crawling. The souls were taking their skeletons a-walking. Then a fiddle moaned, and it sounded rude. And up through the ground come a bubbling brew. Blood, that is. Black gold. Witch's tea. Witches flew across the sky. Those kids were so scared they were sure they would die. The ghosts were moaning and the revelers cried, for none of these guys even knew that they had died. It was a night for the dead to mourn for their souls. It was a party for the ghosts in their assorted roles. They all assembled in a country dance line, and the headless horseman kept a beat on the spine. The wolf was howling at the big full moon when through the air came a familiar tune, and out of the woods jumped this 8-foot guy, and when he heard the music, he began to cry, "Ghost party tonight, ghost party tonight, ghost party tonight, ghost party tonight." Well, Bobby had had about all he could take. He grabbed Jenny's hand and they started to break. They danced their way to the side of the graves and then ducked on out when they started the wave. It was a daring escape as they ran for the car, jumped in and laid rubber through some freshly poured tar. Ghost party tonight, ghost party tonight, ghost party tonight, ghost party tonight. It was a daring escape, and they won't soon forget. Souls were sounding when they little to regret. So if you find yourself on a graveyard site, make sure it's not on a Halloween night. Ghost party tonight, ghost party tonight, ghost party tonight, ghost party tonight. Once more, ghost party tonight, ghost party tonight, ghost party tonight. Ghost party tonight. Thank you.
You can sit down now. Wrap back up in your blanket. I brought an old story because I want you to hear something you would have heard if you had been at the very first ghost story gathering in 1975. Ooh, yeah. There isn't anybody here who was there besides me and Dana, right? Right? Anybody? Okay. So this is an old story. You know, it's 50 years old at least, but it's older than that. You know, Joseph Jacobs put this story in a book in 1893. So it's that old, but it's older than that. Because in Joseph Jacobs' time, the old stories were disappearing, and he felt he had to save them. You see, life had changed. People used to live in the same place all the time. And everybody told the same stories from generation to generation. And then things changed. And now, nobody was listening when the old people told stories. And when the old people died, the stories died. So Joseph Jacobs went around and he found the oldest people he could find. And he said, "Tell me, what were the stories you heard when you were young?" And he wrote them down and he put them in a book, so that they would be saved. He rescued the stories so that I could tell them, you could hear them, you could tell them again, and the stories will have a future. Now this is a story that you're going to have to use your imagination for. It's an old story, and it's going to take you a lot of imagination to realize how dark that graveyard was. It was dark in the way nights were dark when there were no electric lights, not anything. When the light came from a sliver of a moon up there, and that obscured by the clouds that the wind was blowing across it, so that only occasionally did a little light come down and you could see the stones marking the graves. In the far corner of that graveyard, there was a little lantern light. And the little pool of yellow light around that lantern barely touched the dark. It was beside a new dug grave. And the grave digger was asleep in the bottom of the grave. Now, there's a little bit of light over there, way across the cemetery. It's a little glow that pulses in a window. That's the stone cottage where the grave digger lives, and that's where his wife and cat are waiting for him. He's late. They're sitting by the fire, and the fire is burned down. The house is full of shadows. And when the gravedigger's wife looks up, all she can see of her black cat is the splash of white on his chest and the glitter of firelight in his eyes. Everything's quiet. And then the door's flung open. The gravedigger comes stumbling in, looking around wildly, waving his lantern and calling out, "Who's Tom Tildrum?" Who? Says his wife. Are you mad? Oh, no, he said. I'm never mad. It's just the most uncanny thing has happened. And it's so wild that if I were to tell it to you, you wouldn't believe me. Well, said his wife, tell it. I'll try. Oh, he said, I was out digging old Mr. Fordyke's grave, and I fell asleep. And I was awakened by a noise. It was meow. Meow, said the cat. Oh, yes, just like that, said the gravedigger. And I peeked up out of the grave, and what do you think I saw? Well, I've no idea, said his wife. I've no idea at all. Tell me. Well, there were 9 black cats out there, and every one of them as black as our Tom, with a slash of white on their chests and their eyes just glowing, I don't know what from. And what do you think they were doing? I'm sure I have no idea, said the gravedigger's wife. Well, 8 of them were carrying a coffin. A little coffin, 4 on a side, like pallbearers. And the coffin was covered with a black cloth. And on the top of it, there was a little gold crown. And the 9th one in front, he was keeping the steps so that they all stepped in time. And every 3rd step, they all cried out together, meow, meow, said the cat. Yes, just like that, said the gravedigger. And they came up towards me. And they were staring right at me. Well, like the cat is. Look at him. He's staring at me just like those 2 cats did. Never mind the cat, said his wife. Tell me what happened. Well, he said, they came up, and that one in front, he's looking straight into my eyes, and he spoke. I tell you, it's true. He spoke to me. He said, "Tell Tom Tildrum that old Tim Tildrum's dead." And that's why I said, "Who's Tom Tildrum?" Because how can I tell Tom Tildrum that old Tim Tildrum's dead if I don't know who Tom Tildrum is? Look at the cat, said his wife. Look at the cat. And well he might, for old Tom had stood up. Old Tom was swelling. Old Tom was grinning. Old Tom's eyes were glowing, and old Tom said, "What? Old Tim's dead? Then I am the king of the cats." And with that, he rushed up the chimney and was never more seen again.
I've been colder at these things. Hello, everybody. My name is Patty Callison, and I've only been a member of the Bloomington Storytellers Guild for maybe 40 years. I joined when I was just a baby. The story that I have for you tonight is one that I've been telling, and if you've been coming here, but you know, about every 6 years or so, I will tell this story because it involves you helping me. And the older I get, the more help I need. I don't have my intestines trailing over my back yet, but you know what I'm saying. Now, in this story, there are 3 dogs. And when the boy in the story calls his dogs, he goes like this. Listen carefully, because you're going to do this. Barney McCabe, Doodly-Doo, and Sue Boy, your master's calling you. Okay, I want you to try that. I want you to make me proud. Ready? Barney McCabe, Doodly-Doo, and Sue Boy, your master's calling you. That was almost okay. Now, when the dogs hear that, they sing this song. They go, Master, master, coming on time. 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 Okay, you can try that. And if you hit your 5s, they will get warmer. Ready? Master, master, coming on time. 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 Okay, maybe I just can't hear you because you're so far away. Now, there is also a witch in this story. And she likes to chop on things. And so her song goes like this. Chip on the old block, chip on the new block, chip on the old block, chip on the new block. Now make sure I can hear that. Ready? Chip on the old block, chip on the new block, chip on the old block, chip on the new block. All right, I'm going to let you know when it's your turn to help me. Is everybody ready? Now, once there were 2 children who asked their mama, could they take a walk in the woods? And their mama said, well, I guess so. But now, children, I've heard tales that there's a witch in the woods, so you need to be really, really careful. Now, John and Mary, that's what the kids' names were, they assured their mama that they'd be just fine. Mary went and she got a glass and she filled it with milk. And she set that glass of milk on the kitchen table. And she said, now, Mama, if you see that milk turn to blood,
you'll know that a witch has got us, and you need to go let out Barney, McCabe, Doodly Doo, and Sue Boy, the three dogs. And so their mom said, okay. Now John, he's a pretty smart boy. He went out to the barn and he got himself 3 kernels of magic corn. And he took those kernels of magic corn and he stuck them down in his pocket. Well, then their mama made him a little lunch of peanut butter and spaghetti sandwiches, my favorite. And pack some other thing, maybe some Fritos or something along with it, you know. And the kids took that and they went for a walk in the woods. Do 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 dee do 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 doodly doo. Well, it was a beautiful day. And the sky was clear, just a little crisp October coolness to it. The leaves were starting to change. And John and Mary, they walked. And they walked. And they walked until they came to a little clearing next to a stream. And they settled themselves out and they got out their lunch. They got out their peanut butter and spaghetti sandwiches, which were their favorites too. And they got out their Fritos, got a little bit of water from the stream. And refreshed as they were, they went walking some more. Do, 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 doodly do. And they walked. And they walked. And they walked. And they walked. And then they kind of noticed it was getting kind of late. The sun was getting kind of low in the sky. And John turned to Mary and he said, Mary, I think we need to head on home, don't you? Yeah, John, I think we ought to head home. So, John and Mary turned around to head home. But that trail that they had been walking on had just sort of disappeared. Well, Mary, I guess we'll just keep on a-walking. Okay, John, said Mary. And they commenced to walking again through the dark, dark woods. Do 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 doodly do 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 doodly do. And they walked quite a ways, and it got darker and darker, and it got colder and colder, and they walked to the edge of a clearing, and when they got there, they saw a pretty little cabin sitting there with the windows were all lit, and you could barely make out, but there were flower boxes under those windows, and there was smoke coming out of the chimney. Oh, but it's warm in there, said John. I reckon you're right, said Mary. Come on, said John. And he and Mary went up to the door, and they knocked. And after a while, the door began to open. woman with a nose about a foot long stuck her head out of the door, and she looked at those children, so nice and sweet and chubby. Oh, John. He said, "Oh, good evening, ma'am. My sister Mary and I we're out walking in the woods, and we kind of lost, and well, we're sort of wondering if we could come in and spend the night and maybe get a little something, a little supper, and then in the morning when it's light, we can find the trail again and head on back home to our mama." Oh, of course, children. Why don't you come right on in? So John and Mary went in. The old lady sat them down at a table, and she got them some nice warm ham and beans, a little cornbread. And they had a bowl of that and even some more. Both John and Mary, they began to yawn, and the old lady said, "Now, children, up that stairway up in the loft, there's a nice soft mattress, quilt on it. You can go up there and sleep, and in the morning I'll fix you some breakfast and pack you a little lunch, and you can go find your way home." So John and Mary thanked the old lady very much, and they started up the stairs. And sure enough, there was a great big feather bed. Oh, all soft and very fluffy, with a beautiful warm-looking quilt on it and some big pillows. Well, they took off their shoes, but they just crawled on into bed with their clothes on. They were so tired. And they pulled up the quilt, and they went to sleep. Now, after a while, that old lady could kind of hear 'em just softly snoring upstairs. She knew that they were asleep. So she went out to her kitchen, and she got out her nice, long butcher knife. It needed some sharpening. So she went over to her grindstone, and she gave it a kick there, and she started sharpening her knife and singing this song that you all know so well. Chip on the old block, chip on the new block, chip on the old block, chip on the new block. She got that thing a whirring, and the sparks were flying off that knife as it got sharper and sharper, and she really got into it. Chip on the old block, chip on the new block, chip on the old block, chip on the new block. Well, she got so loud, kind of woke John up. What is that? And he got out of the bed, and he walked very softly in his stocking feet, and there was a knot hole in the floor, and you could see down to the floor below. And so he went and he looked. Mary, come here and take a look. I think this old lady's a witch. John, I think you're right. And I think we ought to get out of here. John agreed. They kind of looked around and, well, there was a window. And they went over and they raised that window real quiet like. And then John reached down into his pocket and he pulled out one of those kernels of magic corn. And he threw it out the window, and where it landed, there magically appeared a ladder. And John and Mary, they went over and they went down that ladder just as quiet as could be. And I noticed that there was a pumpkin patch over here, the witch's garden. So they went over and they each got them a couple of pumpkins and they went back up the ladder. And they went over to that bed real quiet. And they put the pumpkins in the bed and they pulled that quilt up over the pumpkin so it looked like somebody was still asleep there. And then they picked up their shoes and they tippy-toed over to the window again and they went down the ladder and they put on their shoes and they started running just as fast as they could. In the meantime, that witch had decided that her knife was sharp enough. And so she started up the stairs to the loft. And she went over to the bed. And she raised up her knife. And she chopped here and she chopped there and she stabbed here and stabbed there. She grabbed onto that quilt, which was all cut up now, and she pulled it back. Oh. There was the biggest mess of pumpkins and seeds you ever saw. Turned around, she saw that window open. Ah! She ran over to it, and just like that, she was down that ladder with knife in hand chasing after those kids. And the kids are running as fast as they can, but for an old lady, she ran pretty well. Well, they ran, and they ran. Do-do-do-do-doodly-doo, 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 do-do-do-do-doodly-doo. Well, she was almost caught up with them, and they didn't know what they were going to do. So they stopped, and John reached down in his pocket, and he pulled out a second kernel of magic corn, and he threw it on the ground. And where it landed, there magically began to grow a pine tree. And it grew, and it grew, and it grew, and John got on one side of it, and Mary climbed onto the other, and it grew, and it grew, and it went up into the sky so that they could look down as the witch caught up to them. Yeah! Ha! She looked up the tree at them, and then she took out her knife and again began to sing this song. Chip on the old block, chip on the new block, and you joined in and helped her. Chip on the old block, chip on the new block. Well, John and Mary, they're at the top. What are they going to do? She's down there, she's chipping away, and back home, their mama had been waiting for them. She was rocking in the chair, and she'd kind of dozed off because the kids hadn't but the kids hadn't gotten back yet. She kind of woke herself up and she looked over on the kitchen table and that glass of milk. That milk had turned blood red. And she knew that the witch had her children. So she ran out and she unlatched the gate to the dog's kennel. And out they came, Barney McCabe, Doodly-Doo, and Sue Boy. And about that time, John at the top of the tree started to call his dogs. You remember this? Barney McCabe, Doodly-Doo, and Sue Boy, your master's calling you. And here come the dogs. Master, master, coming on time. 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 Well, the witch is just a chipping away and a chipping away. John and Mary are starting to feel that pine tree start to list to one side. John looks up and he sees his dogs coming. There's one problem. Between the dogs and the tree and the kids and the witch, there's a river. There's no way the dogs can get across that river in time. So John reaches down in his pocket and he pulls out that last kernel of magic corn, and with all of his might, he throws it. It sails through the air and lands at the edge of the river, and where it lands there magically appears and just when I was doubting your intellect. And Barney McCabe, Doodly-Doo, and Sue Boy came running across that bridge. And while Barney McCabe, he grabbed that witch by her throat. Ah! And Doodly-Doo grabbed an arm. And Sue Boy, he preferred a foot. And they dragged that witch over to that bridge, and they dropped her into the river splash. And that's the way this story ends. Thank you all for helping me out.
You know, I still remember the first story hour, ghost story hour that I did in the park. We were over in the shelter across the way, and our lighting consisted of 3 jack-o'-lanterns and a flashlight. We've come a long way, but I have always been the one who thinks that this is the wrong time of year. In fact, any time of year is the wrong time to really focus on gory stories and hate and ghosts and goblins. And so I always tell them I want to do a love song. And that's what I'm going to do. This is a love song that was written in the 50s. by a professor in mathematics, Dr. Thomas Andrew Lear. And one of my favorites. I hold your hand in mine, dear. I press it to my lips. I take a healthy bite of your dainty fingertips. My joy would be complete, dear, if you were only here. But still I keep your hand as a precious souvenir. The night you died, I cut it off. I really don't know why. For now, each time I kiss it, I get blood stains on my tie. Yuck. I'm sorry now I killed you, for our love was something fine. But till they come and get me, I will hold your hand in mine. This is Stephanie. Stephanie's come down from Maine, our featured storyteller, just to tell us a story. It's good to see you, Stephanie.
Good to see you too.
You found Karen. Oh, I've missed her.
It's good to be home, sweet Bloomington, our hometown, born and raised. Thank you so much, School of Library and Information Science. Shirley Fitzgibbons, a shout out for introducing myself and so many to storytelling, the art form that I love so much. Thank you for the Guild introducing me and accepting me, and I was a part of this for 30 years. And also, of course, Monroe County Public Library and City Parks. Fabulous collaboration here in Monroe County. The Festival of Ghost Stories, which I am literally bringing home tonight. Let's wrap her up. Ready? All right. I have for you my favorite kind of tale, a cautionary tale with information you should listen to. For in the low countries of the Carolinas, South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, but creeping their way this way, are witches, women known as boo-hags, that take on the shape of a human woman so that they can catch a man, trick him into marriage. But at night, they change their form, they change their shape, and they fly off to the swamps to be with their boo daddies. And the moral of this story is, no matter what variant of this tale you hear, those women change their shape, and there could be one sitting next to you right now. And it is so known that this is a risk, that one could come into your life, marry you, and that they paint their doors, window frames and door frames, bright blue. This is the only way to keep them out of your house and out of your life, out of a marriage. And if you travel in the Low Countries, you will see blue door frames everywhere. And in this story, we go to one of those houses, brightly painted, and inside a sweet, newly married couple. And yet the groom is awakened in the middle of the night, and he looks to his side, and his beautiful new bride is not by his side. He's worried for her, and he searches their small house downstairs in the living room and kitchen, even up to their attic that they just moved to this house. There's nothing up there, And when he's up there, he does not find her, but he sees that there is a large door used in the house to bring large furniture or a chest from the lower outside to the inside, and it's unlatched and it's swinging open. So he pulls it to and latches it, and I am sorry to tell you that he just went back to sleep. He labored daily in the cane sugar fields, and he was exhausted. And the next morning he woke up, and there she was, by his side. She didn't say anything, and so he didn't say anything either. Did regular morning routine, breakfast, off to work. And he did go to work, but he told the foreman that he wasn't feeling well, that he would go back home, but he did not. He had formed a plan, and he went down to the river to a tree he knew well, and he rested back against it and slept on and off throughout the day so that he'd be ready that night to watch and wait and see where his wife was going. And so, at the usual time, he came home and they had their dinner there at the table, but he began to pretend to be sleepy, and he yawned so much, and he said he might go to bed early. So she encouraged that. She scurried him along. "You go, dear, you go, and I'll be up in a bit." And so he went into the room that they shared, and he lay down, and he tried to pretend that he was asleep. And he got the breathing down, and the heart rate slowed, but that flickering of the eyelids he worried would give him away. And he heard her. He heard her ascending the stairs and coming up, and he heard her come into their bedroom, and he sensed her walking around the side of the bed. He felt her hovering over him, watching him closely to make sure he was asleep. And she must have been convinced, because she left the room, and as soon as she first step, he was out of that bed and in his sock feet. He watched as she descended the stairs, and there at the entrance to their living room at the door, he saw her turn in, and so quietly down the stairs so that he could lean in the doorway and press his face, and with one eye he looked in that room. And even though it was nighttime, he could see clearly, for the moonlight was pouring in, and there was only one piece of furniture in their living room. It was the ashwood spinning wheel that she had brought to the marriage. And he watched as his beautiful bride stood there beside that spinning wheel and did a most unusual thing. In the moonlight, she knelt down and grabbed her cotton nightgown and pulled it up over her head and dropped it till she was standing there, stark naked. But that's not the unusual thing. Naked, she sat on that spinning wheel that he'd never seen any yarn or thread. And she sat and began to push that treadle up and down and up and down. And this made the spinning wheel turn. And as it turned, the spindle where the yarn would normally wind up began to spin. And the husband watched from the doorway as she reached her hand up towards that spindle. And with her other hand, she pulled on her finger and pulled off the skin. The skin came loose from the finger. And she pressed that loose-skinned finger against the spindle, and it grabbed her flesh and began to pull her flesh away in one big mass from her hand and her arm and the face and down. And soon, there was a bloody sack of skin, a mass spun around that spindle, and there she sat on the spinning wheel like a butchered side of beef. She had no eyelids, no eyelashes, and he saw so clearly her sinews and tendons and ropes of muscle. And the husband from the doorway involuntarily gagged in the back of his throat And she turned and looked in his direction, and he thought he got back in time. And as quickly as he could in his sock feet, he raced back up those stairs, and he dove underneath the covers, and this time he had a much more difficult time regulating his breathing and getting himself under control. And he could tell she was coming. He heard the wet slap of her footsteps coming up the wooden stairs. He felt and heard the slap of her feet coming around the end of the bed. And once again, she hovered over him, watching if he was asleep. And as she watched, he felt the drip, drop, drip of blood onto the coverlet. But she must have been in a hurry, for she was convinced again, and she left the room, this time ascending the ladder to that attic. And he was quick out of bed just in time to see the last of her feet going up into that attic. And so he climbed that ladder too, careful not to be where she had just stepped, and he pulled himself up just enough to peer over the floorboards of that attic. And he saw her go to that door, so large, so tall, that when she opened it and unlatched it, she was able to stand and stretch her arms wide. And from that ladder, he watched his beautiful bride launch herself into the night sky. And he saw her fly around the house once, making sure no one had seen. But she was in a hurry to be with her own kind deep in the swamps. And so off she went. And as she flew over the village houses below, so great was her evil, so great an evil that in the sleeping homes, milk that was fresh curdled and soured as she flew over. Wounds that had healed opened and bled. So great was her evil that cats turned against their masters and clawed them in the night. And this man knew that he was lucky to have discovered what he was living with so early on. But it was his bride, his love. And so he knelt there in that attic door and he cried for the loss of his loved one. But then he dried his tears and he knew what to do. He went down to that shed and he got that bucket of blue paint he'd seen when they moved in, and he painted that outside trim of the attic door that had been missed. That was how she was coming and going. And now it was literally painted against her. And then he latched it. But then he had a much more dire task to do down in the living room. He stood beside that ashwood spinning wheel, looking at that mass of skin, her entire skin all in one. But where? And so he began to pull at it and unwrap it. And soon the length of it was hanging heavy from his fingers. And he carried that sack of skin into the kitchen, where he got a bag of salt and another of cayenne pepper. And he dunked those seasonings deep down and coated them all the way to the toes. And then he took that seasoned skin out to the porch, to a hook. He knew he'd see it right where he placed it. And then he went inside to the kitchen, turned the lantern low, and sat there in a vigil, waiting and watching through the window, the direction of the swamps, waiting for the witch to come back, for he no longer saw her as his wife. And so she came. Right as the light was just starting to show, he saw her coming from the swamps, flying fast. And she went around to that attic door, and then she saw it painted shut against her. And she screamed like a panther, and she started racing around the house, trying to find a way in. And that's when she saw her skin hanging on the porch. And she landed on all fours on the porch, and she looked around, sniffing, gonna find him, gonna kill him. But first she had to get into the skin before the sun was fully up. And so she took it off the hook, and she smelled at it, but she couldn't smell those spices deep down inside. And the sun was rising, time was short, and so she put on her skin, first one leg, then the other, and she pulled it to, and she pulled it on, and she was just starting to affix the skin back on her skull when she felt the burn of salt on raw flesh. and now she screamed like an animal caught in a fire, and it was a pitiful sound, and she needed out of the skin, and she raked at her own flesh, and the blood began to pour down and pool on the floorboards and drip off the side. But the husband inside the window just watched with sorrow, and she couldn't get help from him. Her only hope was help from her own kind in the swamps, but the sun was rising fast, and so she turned and she launched herself again, and in a wobbly flying pace she got to the swamps. But they were all gone. The sun was too high, and she was too far gone. And she began in the air to fumble and fall, and she began to spin wildly out of control, and then she just burst into 1,000 pieces of blood and meat and bone, and they rained out of the sky, and they fell, and they plop, plop, plopped into the swamp below. And you got to know that that morning in the low country of the Carolinas, those alligators ate well. The boo hag. Thank you. I heard that story at Corn Island Storyteller Festival by Bob Sanders, another variant of it. I hope you find a variant to tell. Thank you very much. Jenny?
Oh, don't leave, dear.
Okay.
No, don't leave. We have come to the end of the stories, but we have so many tellers here. We want everybody who told stories today to come on up here and come up on stage with us.
Or in the past.
And now everybody who's told in the past. In fact, if you're a member of the Storytellers Guild, and if you've ever told with us for any of our events, come on up. And if you're one of our wonderful, wonderful support members, come on up. Look at this. I just want you to know that there are lots of stories that are going to come your way some other time. And we have one last thing to tell you when we're all up here. When everybody's gathered. Oh, look at this. Hey! My goodness, they just keep coming. There are more storytellers and more stories. And we'll be back, next year, right?
All of us.
And it could be a long program, but fun. Wouldn't it be fun? All right, we have one last thing to tell you. All together now. You know your line? Okay. Kiddos, and where can I get the seeds?
Don't forget, if there are any left, there's scenes up there by the cookies and the cider, and we're so glad that you were with us tonight. What a treat.
Thanks for coming.